It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. All right, I've got a great show today. Really cool guy, Shawn Attwood. His website is ShawnAttwood.com. He's a very interesting guy. He's written a couple of... Today we're going to be talking about, as I stutter and mumble over everything here, we're going to be talking about the book American Made. Who Killed Barry Seal? Pablo Escobar or George H.W. Bush? And my money's on Bush. Okay. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. But our friend here, Shawn's also written a couple other books. This guy's had a very interesting life. Okay. The English Shawn trilogy, and then Party Time, Hard Time, Prison Time, and then Life Lessons. So, Shawn, are you there?
Yes, I certainly am. Cheers from London.
So nice to hear your voice there, my friend. So tell us about yourself. Who is Shawn Attwood?
Well, I grew up in the industrial northwest of England in a little chemical manufacturing town. So I didn't have much money, but I developed an unnatural interest in the stock market at a very early age. I was 14 when I started following it, and my economics teacher started explaining how it all worked and what the Financial Times meant. And then at 16, I borrowed £50 from my grandmother, and I doubled it in British Telecom shares. So I got hooked at this young age. I'm telling all my mates in my little town, gonna go to America, make $1 million, fly you guys over. That was my dream. Went on to college, university, did business studies, and having visited my aunts and uncles in Phoenix, Arizona as a teenager, seeing the swimming pools, the houses seemed twice as big, the sun was out all the time, the cars everywhere, people heard my accent and they'd roll out the red carpet. Coming from this little town where it was raining constantly, that was like Mecca for me. So when I graduated, moved to Arizona, got work initially as a stockbroker, and then during the dot-com bubble, I did manage to become a millionaire. But the money went to my head, and I started to throw rave parties with it and had people importing ecstasy. I was completely emotionally immature, being in my 20s, and I thought I was Mr. Cool Guy, living on $1 million house on the side of a mountain in Tucson, throwing these parties for thousands of people. I got addicted to that lifestyle until SWAT team came and smashed my door down.
Yeah, don't you hate when that happens?
Well, I credit them now with saving my life, because I was on a very dangerous path at that point with Sammy the Bull Gravano being my competitor in the ecstasy market and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we were talking off the air. You think maybe he might have been one of the guys that ratted you out?
Not him specifically, but reading the police paperwork, some of the people who worked in his ecstasy ring did give my name into the police, yes. Now,
you were importing the X from where? From Israel?
No, from Holland.
From Holland. Okay, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And what part
in the beginning, I was just buying it from local people. They could only give me like 50 to 100 at a time. So I found out where they were getting it from. They were getting it out of LA. So LA, I could get anywhere from like 500 to maybe 5,000 at the most. But as things got bigger, I needed to get tens of thousands, and then I started to go directly through Holland.
And this was at your parties in Tucson?
I was living in a house in the Catholic hotels in Tucson, but the parties were mostly in the Phoenix area.
And there were enough people to attend the rave. What year was this?
This was 96 onwards. Now, we're not talking LA rave numbers here. Right. In LA, you could get over 100,000 people. The most I ever got at one of my parties was 10,000 people.
That's interesting, because you're selling all this X, and then you got Sammy the Bull Gravano selling all this X too. There was that much of a market. I guess a lot of it was being transported across the country, right?
Oh, good grief. The demand for real ecstasy was insane back then. The manufacturers in Holland could make it for so many pennies, and the street price was $25, $30.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a nice little business.
Yeah, but ultimately you have to pay the price.
Yeah. So now, how was your time there? We were talking about the different prisons you were in. You're all over the place, huh?
Started out in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail system. For 26 months I was unsentenced.
Ouch.
And at that time, that jail had the highest rate of death out of all jails and prisons in America. National Geographic Channel put my story out as an episode of Locked Up Abroad, and they researched it, and they concluded that 62 people died over 5 years in that jail around the time I was there.
It's fascinating how people here in the States will look at that man as a hero and say, oh, he's being tough on criminals. When you were there, especially in that's a pre-trial tent city jail, did you run into anybody that was such a danger to, how many people did you run into that was such a danger that they had to be off the streets? I
understand why people think lock them up and throw away the key, let's get tough on crime and criminals, because the media...
Right.
All they portray is extreme crimes, serial killers, pedophiles, murderers, rapists on one hand, and then on the other hand, they say how easy it is. It's a holiday camp. They've got TV and they've got luxuries.
Right.
So when I went in there, I was under that false impression, but I quickly realized that it was the warehousing of low-level drug users.
Yep.
I saw the racism. I saw black guys, Mexicans get anywhere from 2 to 5 years for joints of marijuana. I saw a Vietnam vet get 13 years for some crumbs of cocaine on the carpet of his car. And, it just woke me up to what was really going on in the world with all these corporations making money off the back of these people. I think it was approximately $50,000 a year of taxpayers' money per prisoner that they got for each drug arrest.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And then they nickel and dime you on every little thing. I was telling the audience, I have a friend here. This woman used to clean my house, and has 5 kids, and she was homeless, and she had no place to stay, so she wound up living in this drug house. And even to live there in this filthy drug house, she had to exchange sex with these men to stay in his house.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I know. I met her because she was feeding the homeless. This is how I met her.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she just got 6 years because they raided that house, and she took the fall for the whole thing. And I'm trying to send her a little bit of money. You can't send her too much money because they take it out for the fines. So I'm sending her these little $10 at a time. And they add $3. You send her $10. They charge you $3 to send this poor kid $10. It is an absolute disgrace.
You get gouged from every angle. I made a collect call home back to the UK. I was on the phone for about 5 minutes, and they charged my parents about $60, $70.
I was going to guess $40, yeah, but I believe it's $60. Just when you think they can't, they have no shame, they take it one step further.
And I said to a guard, "How do you guys get away with this? They were mentally ill prisoners getting murdered, the dead rats in the food,
right.
Cockroaches crawling all over us at night." And he said, "The world has got no idea what's going on in here." And that motivated me to start writing everything down. And it got smuggled out of the jail, put online as a blog, John's Jail Journal. And it went on to attract a lot of media attention to the conditions.
Yeah, but still, this guy, he's out there campaigning with Trump and stuff like that. People think he's a hero. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, this millions of dollars you made in the stock market, right? Did you get to keep any of that money, or they seize that too?
I thought I was outsmarting the police by flying people over from the UK and putting money in their names. The cops put a virus in my computer, a NetBus Trojan horse. So the day I was arrested, they took everything. Now, I was worth the millions at the peak of the dot-com bubble, but I got arrested May 16, 2002. So the stock market had crashed. So I was back down to 6 figures by the time they caught up with me.
Well, I tell you, you've had some life, my friend. You've had some life, I tell you, man. God bless you. Now, what made you get interested in Barry Seal?
Okay, I wrote my life story as a trilogy, and I was looking for a new area to go into, and I thought the war on drugs would be a natural progression. So about 5 years ago, I started doing research, and what I mean by that was I drive over 20,000 miles a year. I go in schools telling my story in the hope young people won't get involved in drugs and crime. So as I'm driving around, I'm listening to all these videos on YouTube, and the same names kept coming up: Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar. And in the beginning, I was just going to write one book with these guys' stories, all weaving them together. But, the stories just became so big as I researched more and more and ordered dozens and, books on the subject. I thought these guys deserve books of their own. So that's what led me on to doing Barry as a book.
Did you catch the first Barry Seal movie, the one with Dennis Hopper?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but now what did you think of the accuracy?
Yeah, I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the wiki page for Barry Seal, it defines him as an American smuggler of drugs and arms, aircraft pilot, dealer, and money launderer who flew flights for the Medellin cartel. So the movie exactly went along those lines. It completely left out the enormous story of Barry Seal's involvement with the CIA.
Yeah, it was totally and Dennis Hopper, man, you think he was like a hero when I was a kid, man, doing this whitewash movie, makes you wonder, what happened to him? Now,
yeah, I agree.
What do you think happened? What do you think of this new movie coming out with Tom Cruise? Now, Tom Cruise, obviously, he's gonna tell us the truth, right?
Well, it was originally named Mena after the town in Arkansas where Barry moved to from Louisiana to do his CIA drug smuggling. And they changed it to American Made. So I think it's going to have some patriotic flavor to it, and they're going to go along the lines that he was a renegade smuggler, pilot, and transporter for the Medellin cartel. I don't think they're going to get into the CIA stuff too strongly. Or
they could make him out to be a hero, here he was fighting the Contras, doing everything he could to the good old US of A, and with an appearance by Sheriff Joe. They would show up there, a cameo appearance.
Well, Reagan and Bush certainly tried to turn his sting operation for the DEA that he did into a heroic thing, exposing that Pablo Escobar and the wrong side of the Nicaraguans, claiming that they were into the cocaine when it was all propaganda.
Yeah, what about that? I've seen that film. The Sandinistas were supposedly involved in some of his drug dealing. What do you make of that?
Well, there's different theories. There's the theory that Barry, that was filmed somewhere else completely, and the CIA doctored it. Pablo Escobar said after watching it that I never unload drugs myself. How can this be possible? I just read Pablo Escobar's son's book, and he's towing the line that Barry Seal did go and see Pablo in Nicaragua when Pablo was on the run. So there's multiple theories about it.
Yeah, I can see the son having to say something like that. He doesn't want to wind up like his father,
Well, supposedly in his second book now, the son has come out and said that Pablo was working for the CIA in the early years.
Very interesting. Okay, and
that made news headlines last month. I did actually get interviewed on Russian television about that one. So it's only in Spanish right now, the book, but I would love to read it.
Yeah, I'd love to get him on too, but if he only speaks Spanish, it's no good. So tell us about Barry Seal. What's the story of Barry Seal? Who is he?
He's the kind of guy that if you were on a plane and it was under enemy fire and it was getting strafed, you'd pretty much have confidence that this guy could land you safely. I mean, as a teenager, he used to bicycle out to the airport and look at the planes landing. He just became obsessed. He started flying at the age of 15. He was up in the air with advertising banners. When his schoolmates went to out-of-state football games, on a bus, he would fly there. He would land in a helicopter. He would land in a plane. He even took girls on dates in the sky. So, he was a natural, and he joined the Civil Air Patrol in his teens, and that's how he got introduced to Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferry, and that then led to him, getting employed by the CIA.
What do you think of the theories? Because, Hopsicker found that photo of all those characters, in that club, that nightclub, and they even got a picture. Like some people say it's a Tosh Plumley, some people say it's Sturgis with like his jacket covering his face. What do you make of the theory, though, that it was Barry Seal who had the getaway plane there in Dallas?
I think that Hopsicker's research is so thorough.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Barry's wife who told him that. I would have to agree with that. I think it's highly feasible.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we were just talking about Daniel Hopsiger a bit off the phone, a bit off the air, and the man's work is just incredible. The work he's done, and the body of work he's done over his life. I offered him a show on one of my stations. I'd love to get him to host a show weekly, but incredible work. Now, you actually talked to Barry's son.
Yes, he said that I've nailed the big picture.
Oh, really?
And he thanked me for getting the true story out there.
Now, how old was Barry's son? How old is he now, Barry's son?
I don't know exactly how old he is now. He's getting on.
Oh, like 40s, 50s?
Looking at his picture, I would guess so, yeah.
Okay, so then he was old enough to know what was going on, what his dad was doing back there during Iran-Contra and stuff.
Well, if your father died under the circumstances that Barry did, I imagine you're going to research the hell out of that, not just block it out. At some point, you're going to want to know what the bottom line is. And my conclusion in my book is that George H.W. Bush, through the federal court system, took away Barry's protection.
Yeah.
Had him, assigned to a halfway house with no weapons, no bodyguards that could be armed, where the Medellin cartel knew exactly where he was when they had this hit out on him. So George H.W. Bush basically handed him over to Pablo Escobar and the Ochoas.
And you think it was the Escobar and the Ochoas who actually did the shooting? Or had the guys there doing the shooting?
Looking at the people who were arrested afterwards, and looking at the testimony of Max Mermelstein, who was central to the plot to get Barry. He was offered $1 million for him dead. I'm sorry, $500,000 for him dead, $1 million for him alive. And if you look at all the people who got arrested afterwards, they were all linked to this plot with Max Mermelstein, who was coordinating this for the Colombians out of Florida. And Max couldn't carry it off himself, so they sent over some heavier people, and they ended up locating Barry, and that's how he got killed.
How many arrests were there?
Well, that's in dispute as well, because some of the guys who got arrested were mysteriously allowed to go back to Colombia without any charges being brought against them. So in the end, the indictments, I think with like 3 or 4 people got life sentences.
Well, that kind of stuff happens, right? You were arrested. They almost let you leave the country, right, before charges were filed.
Yeah, but these people had information about a bigger picture than the federal justice system wanted to be exposed.
And what about Ollie North? What's his involvement in all of this?
Okay, so if you just go back a bit and look at where the CIA were with cocaine smuggling in the 1980s, the Boland Act had come about, and Reagan and Bush desperately wanted to get arms and supplies to the Nicaraguan rebels, but they were prohibited from doing it. So basically, Bush assigned that to the CIA, and that was Oliver North, that was Felix Rodriguez, and they coordinated all of this cocaine coming into the country. In an exchange, they were sending arms back out, and this was billions of dollars worth of cocaine coming in from Maine, Arkansas, and that was right under the governorship of Bill Clinton, who was getting paid off by the CIA as well.
Yeah, Clinton was also like the attorney general there too, so there's no way this was going on without his knowledge. I
just watched the videos today, the undercover videos filmed of Roger Clinton snorting cocaine, dealing cocaine, and boasting about how he had all these police protecting him. And Roger Clinton, if anyone doesn't know, is Bill Clinton's half-brother, who was ultimately indicted and served some time, but Bill turned around and I think gave him a pardon.
Yeah, and it wasn't a small amount either. It was a couple of pounds that they caught him with, right?
I'm not exactly sure of the amount, but he's boasting about quarter pounds and stuff like that on the phone from what I saw today. And then the other guy who was embroiled in that was Dan Lasseter. He was Bill Clinton's biggest financial contributor at the time, and he went down for distributing cocaine as well. And Clinton gave him a pardon. And in the police paperwork, it said that Lasseter was even giving cocaine to underage girls in exchange for sex.
Yeah, I believe that. Now what do you make? Have you heard the story about Chip Tatum who claims he delivered some coke over to Clinton. What do you make of that story?
If people say, how can not this be true about the CIA trafficking cocaine into America? How is that possible that the federal government would, on one hand, be waging a war on drugs, yet on the other hand, be supplying the very drugs that all these people are getting incarcerated for? Well, I say to people, go on YouTube, look at the pilot testimonies, look at Terry Reid, look at Chip Tatum, look at Bo Abbott. They're all on there, describing exactly what they did down to a T, including, all the work they were involved in, and some of them were involved intricately with Barry Seal. Terry Reid, in particular, he's got a book out called Compromised. And, I've leaned heavily on that for American Made.
How did... back to Barry Seal, his parents. How did he start getting access to planes? His parents were wealthy, that they had planes?
No. He took money from his paper round, and he was using that for flying lessons. And he took that to some guy who's Barry's mother knew. And Barry's mother tried to stop the lessons from happening. And the guy basically said, "This guy is so determined to fly. He's going to find someone to teach him. So, it might as well be me." And so she relented, and that's how he started up.
Yeah, imagine if he didn't, on a different kind of line of work, Now, so then you say he ran into Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferry, and that's how he got involved with the CIA. What was his first missions with the CIA?
Well, his early missions that I'm aware of was going into Cuba.
Okay.
And Barry was, the CIA was supplying arms to both sides. So they were just profiteering. And then that graduated then onto, up into the 1980s when he was bringing all of the cocaine in through Mena.
How did he wind up headquartered out of Mena?
Well, he was in Louisiana, and a lot of heat was coming down on him. And they looked around, and out of the various theories about this, I believe it wasn't a conscious choice by Barry just to leave Louisiana. I think the CIA had already scoped out that Arkansas was the place to go. Bill Clinton was highly corruptible. He had a cocaine habit himself. And it just seemed like the logical place where the authorities could be controlled and recruited to protect what was happening there, as opposed to investigating it. But at the lower level, multiple people did try and investigate it, and they ended up getting nowhere. And all of their testimonies are on YouTube as well.
And how about the Mara Levitt book, Boys on the Tracks, which was how many bodies were turned up dead over the course?
Grief.
Yeah.
My third book in my War on Drugs series is actually going to start out with the story of Linda Ives. So you got Kevin and Don, two teenagers, get found dead on these railroad tracks near Mena. And, the coroner assigned put in there by Bill Clinton, he's saying that they both got stoned on marijuana, fell asleep side by side, and the train ran over them. How ludicrous is that? Now, all the evidence pointed to something else. And what I have concluded actually happened was they were aware of the CIA drug drops. And they were either watching a drug drop, or they were trying to steal some drugs, or they were just up to teenage hijinks in the woods. And the people who had been hired to protect this operation detected them, and these guys got captured and murdered. And then if you look at all the witnesses that were coming forward about this stuff, or investigators had followed up on, the justice system had been so corrupt at the time, this list of witnesses got handed over to a corrupt prosecutor, and all of a sudden these guys all started showing up dead. You're talking dozens of people, and this Maine has only got about a population of 5,000. And all along the way, Linda Ives is trying to get Clinton to do something about it. And, he's completely avoiding her because, like I said earlier, he was getting paid off by the CIA to protect this operation.
Now, were they also, they were landing the planes there and unloading, but were they also doing drops, like just dropping from the sky and keep flying?
Yeah, what they would do is they would do the drug drops, and then helicopters would come in and pick the drugs up, or people in trucks would pick the drugs up, and then they were getting distributed. From what I've researched, some of it was ending up in the hands of the Gambino crime family.
In New York?
Yes.
That's interesting. And some of it was going to Freeway Ricky Ross too, right?
Well, if you look at Gary Webb's research, he uncovered that side of the CAA drug trafficking, but that was on the West Coast, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we're only aware of certain parts of this. I imagine it was going on all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of coke back in those days. There's a lot of coke across the country, man. Really cheap coke.
Have you spoke to Freeway Ricky Ross? I've interviewed him for my book.
Yeah, I had him on the show. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, we had a bad audio connection, but a very jovial guy.
What a hell of a story.
And that is a hell of a story. And even more of a hell of a story is he gets pulled over up in Northern California just recently with allegedly a couple hundred pounds or a couple $100,000 cash, and he just got off of that.
Oh, my goodness.
yeah, I didn't want to bother him because I knew he had a case. But he says, no, I'm not worried. I'll come on the show. Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? This is a good time to take a commercial break. We're here today with Shawn Attwood, and he's calling us from jolly old England over there. He's written the book American Made, Who Killed Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, or George H.W. Bush. All the names here, it goes back to JFK's involved in this, man, and Chip Tatum, and even Dennis Hopper, all these folks here. So Shawn Attwood is the author of American Made, Who Killed Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, or George H.W. Bush. And his website is ShawnAttwood.com. And he's got a couple events coming up in London, Central London, May 22nd, and also on June 13 in Central London. You can go to his website there, find out the address, and head on over there. So, Shawn, you there?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, because let me ask you a question now. Now, when you got caught, right, I'm sure they came to you and they said, hey, Shawn, listen, we want you to come work for us. You make some deals for us. You got caught with $100,000 worth of X. We want you to bring us $300,000 worth of cases. And bring us 3 cases, triple what you got caught with. And what we'll do for you, Shawn, is you'll be out there. We're going to give you our business card, and it says Mr. DEA agent on here. And if you got pulled over, you got a problem, whatever, you pull out this card, and we're going to come down to the spot, and we're going to take care of everything. We're going to get you out of the jackpot. Did they make you an offer like that?
They didn't get that far because I'd been schooled by the New Mexican Mafia. Now, when I started out getting involved in drugs, I ended up just accidentally protecting a guy who got had been in a situation with the police. What happened was, I was in an apartment. It was mostly like university students and stuff like that, and
sure.
There was people smoking some weed, and I was there supplying some X, and this Mexican-American gangster-looking guy was there supplying some coke and some weed, and a policeman walked in, and he goes, I could smell marijuana. Nobody move. And he goes to grab his radio like he's about to call it in and get everybody arrested. So this Mexican-American guy that is in there that I've just met, he pulls out a gun, points it at the cop, and says, the only one not leaving is you. Everyone run. So we all ran out into the night. And I hid in an apartment close by with some friends. And, the police surround the place and everything, the whole complex, there's police everywhere, helicopters out. Anyway, there's a knock on our French windows, and it's the Mexican-American guy, and we let him in. And he schools us. He says, they can't come in without a warrant. If they knock on the door, don't answer it. Here's the law. Here's how we don't let them in. So we did it. We did everything that he said, and the police came, and they went. And at the end of the night, I said, why don't you come back to my house? You're too hot in this area. Just spend the night at my house. I'll keep you safe. So for doing that, he then said to me, Shawn, I'm going to have my brothers watch your back. I had no idea what that meant. A couple of months later, I went over to the house. The lowriders parked outside. I go in there, big Mexican-American guys, tattooed out, drugs everywhere. like big pounds of crystal meth and coke and stuff, and I look over at the TV and there's a rocket propelled grenade launcher on the TV, and I'm not a big tough guy. I'm crapping myself at this point, and I was always scared whenever I went over there. But they taught me. They said, Shawn, if you ever get pulled over leaving our place, the cops do not have a right to search your car. You could tell them you're in a hurry. You don't want to search your car, and you don't have to speak to them. You say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I want a lawyer. And they even told me the name of a lawyer that they used. So when the police came, I was already schooled, and they didn't even try to break me down after that. After I'd said I want a lawyer, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. They did try to break my partner down at the time, and she wasn't schooled in it, but she I'd protected her from what was going on, so she couldn't give them any information really.
So even in the 26 months you were sitting there in Sheriff Joe's camp, they never, your lawyer didn't go to them. We can have a free talk and we can work out a negotiation.
Well, here's the deal. I was the top of the conspiracy.
Yeah,
I was letter A in the crime syndicate. So everybody in my case was asked to cooperate against me and to sign papers. Even people who didn't know me were asked to sign papers stating that they would work for me. Because it was all about nailing me. This wasn't a federal DEA case. It was a state of Arizona case.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my question was, why I asked you that was, here you had Barry Seal. Like, what more could you want? He's working for the CIA, He's working for guys that are in the NSC, Ollie North, sitting around that conference table inside the White House. If you're looking for a hookup, what more could you want? How did he find himself in a position where he got arrested?
Okay. I believe that his arrest was probably a way to get him going undercover for the DIA. Now, the DIA were hiring as an undercover person to infiltrate Pablo, yeah, but I think the CIA was hiring him to go undercover. And then that provided them, a perfect cover story for his drug operation out of Mena. Because if anything came to light, this renegade had been busted by the DIA. I'm sorry, this renegade had been busted by the DEA, and that provided the perfect explanation. But he'd only done one flight for the DEA. He'd been transporting drugs in for years, and no one ever points that out.
So he was doing but how did he come to be an informant for the DEA? They caught him, or he just knocked on the door?
I believe it was a setup. I think that he was assigned to get set up to be apprehended by the DEA, to provide a cover story for the CIA operation out of Mena, Arkansas. Gotcha.
And then right away he makes a deal with the DEA saying, okay, fine, I'll work for you guys undercover. I'll go down and I'll make some shipments with Pablo Escobar and you can film the whole thing.
Exactly. Which is what the Reagan Bush administration wanted. They wanted to point the finger at the Nicaraguan government for being involved in cocaine trafficking. Well, actually, it was the rebels and the CIA.
And Ollie North, it's just, who has a TV show.
Ollie North was coordinating the whole thing.
Yeah.
Ollie North had diary entries talking about being down in South America with the cocaine paste and what to do with it. And according to the lawyer for the three Colombians who were sentenced to life for murdering Barry, the lawyer said that Ollie North was coordinating their activity, directing them towards Barry while they were in America.
It's just amazing, and now they put him on Fox News. He ran for Senate.
Of course, if you play along with this, like Clinton did, Clinton got the presidency.
Yeah.
Ollie North plays along with it. He gets on TV. He runs for the Senate. It's all about the team players who get promoted.
Yeah, he was in town here at this anti-abortion gathering. And I wrangled myself. I was going to get my picture taken with him, but I couldn't get over there to do it. And then that same weekend, me and my daughter, we were going to this church, and we enjoyed the church too. Then the pastor of the church starts saying, and Ollie North is a great American, and he's in town. We were like, we walked right out of there. We never went back. We never went back to that church. You got to be kidding me, man. Oh, God.
That's the power of the media, though, isn't it? It protects these people, and the CIA has the media completely infiltrated.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true, man. So now, How does he...
Look at the anatomy of a smear story they did on Terry Reid.
Yeah.
And did you see the video of Chip Tatum on YouTube talking about how his insurance policy was? He had a picture of George H.W. Bush at a cocaine press in South America.
Wow. No, I never heard that. I never heard that part.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. Chip Tatum's he had his own radio station for a while. He used to play my shows, and we had gotten pretty close. And he's just pretty much taken off, and is back. He's growing marijuana down in Colombia or something like that now.
Oh, really? Yeah. Do you know what's happened to Terry Reid?
No, I don't. No, I was never that familiar with Terry Reid.
Okay.
And Tosh Plumlee's still floating around. He does interviews and stuff like that. He's all over the place.
Okay.
And, of course, good old Freeway Ricky Ross. Now, now they bust him, and there's a trial. Was he expecting help to get out of this trial? Because he did get convicted.
Yeah, if my theory is correct, and this was an undercover thing, when he finally got busted, he turned to his superiors, Oliver North, George H.W. Bush, to bail him out.
Yeah.
But because he knew so much about the operation, he'd become expendable at this point. So they double-crossed him. They took away his protection, assigned him to the halfway house, a fixed address. The day that happened in the courtroom, there was a private investigator who was reporting to the Medellin cartel. So they knew exactly where he was. And then the judge said, you're not allowed to have any weapons and you're not allowed to have any armed bodyguards. So he didn't stand a chance.
So when you talk to his family, what do they say? And when you talk to his son and stuff like that, they think it's Bush? Gave the order?
All that the son has told me so far is that he's happy that I've captured the big picture. And I've done his story proud. He's not got into specific details, and I don't want to kind of put words into their mouths.
I got you. Let me ask you this. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you?
About Barry Seal?
Yeah, about Barry Seal, yeah.
I think you've nailed the big picture on the interview as well, actually.
Okay, so American-made, who killed Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, or George W. Bush? And we're pretty much convinced it was George W. Bush. If
you look at the 1980s,
yeah,
who was the most successful cocaine kingpin? Who got away with it? It was definitely George H.W. Bush. They used Pablo Escobar as a scapegoat. They used the Cali cartel as a scapegoat, and they used Barry Seal as a fall guy.
Yeah, I remember there was even an episode of 60 Minutes where the Cali cartel came out and said, "Listen, we want to negotiate with the American government. Take down the Medellin cartel, put us in charge, and we'll guarantee we're only going to send a certain amount up north." And then that's what happened. Well,
I'm writing a book on the Cali cartel right now, which is going to be out ahead of season 3 of Narcos, and it's just the same story. When Pablo Escobar was the bogeyman for the war on drugs, the CIA was working with the Cali cartel. They jointly had a death squad called Los Pepes, which the Cali cartel financed and the CIA gave intelligence to, which ended up taking down Pablo Escobar. And the primary force behind that was the Castaño brothers. Are you familiar with them?
No, I am not, no.
Well, the Castaño brothers were members of the Medellin cartel. And when Pablo Escobar called the Galeanos and the Moncados to the cathedral and had them executed because he suspected them of cooperating with the Cali cartel, the Castaño brothers were supposed to have been there as well. So they saw the writing on the wall, and they then allied with the Cali cartel and the CIA against Pablo. But because America had all of these resources to fight the war on drugs in Colombia, they needed a new bogeyman. So they continued to work with the Castaño brothers, who took over the cocaine trade, while fighting the Cali cartel. They became, in the eyes of the public, they became the main enemy. And none of it stopped the cocaine going to America. They said Pablo was responsible for 90%. They said the Cali cartel was responsible for 90%. And it just kept increasing and increasing and increasing after they took them down, because the CIA was working with other traffickers.
And you think who was responsible for the death of Escobar? You think that was an order too from Bush, or who was involved? Who was involved in that?
Okay, there's multiple theories on this one as well, which I've detailed in my books. I suspect, well, actually, I believe that Pablo got shot 3 times. He got shot in the back of his leg. He got shot I think it was like in his shoulder area, and that bullet ended up lodged between two of his teeth. And then there was one shot went through his right ear, and it went out the other side of his head by his ear. And now he always said that if he was going to get taken down, he was going to get out his famous pistol, and he was going to shoot himself in the ear. And that's what his son wrote. That's what his family believe. And I don't believe what it says in Killing Pablo, that it's all very patriotic. The special forces in concert with the Colombian National Police and the search block hunted him down with this technology. And according to Los Pepes, the police were so scared of Pablo, they always sent the death squad Los Pepes in first to do their dirty work, and then they would come in afterwards. Los Pepes would disappear, and the police would get the credit in the media. So on the day Pablo was located, according to the Castaño brothers and Don Berna, who was another head of Los Pepes, they went in first. And it was supposed to have been Don Berna's brother who fired at Pablo, who knocked him down. And then I believe while Pablo was down, he shot himself in the ear.
Now, what's going on today? It seems like all the stuff that was being produced and manufactured in Colombia and being brought up here through Florida and stuff like that. Now that's coming up through Mexico, through the Mexican cartels?
The war on drugs is completely futile, and the government knows that because of alcohol prohibition. It's like a balloon. If you put a dent in a balloon on one side, it expands on the other. So when they took the Colombians down, it expanded into Mexico, and that was a natural progression because the Colombians had established trafficking routes through Mexico into America after the blatant drug smuggling on the Florida coast became too hot with the authorities and the media. And then the Mexicans were getting paid a small amount. Well, it added up to massive amounts of money. But they wanted more money. And in the end, they were like, why don't we just do this ourselves? So, the Mexican cartels then became the dominant forces.
But they're not actually growing the cocoa leaves over there, right? In Mexico, it's still coming from Colombia and from Peru and stuff, right?
It's actually sourced south of Colombia from like Peru, Bolivia, and those countries. So Colombia is more of a transit point where, in the huge jungles out there, they can hide these massive cocaine manufacturing labs.
Now, you're not allowed to travel to the USA, but do you travel to Mexico and Colombia and those kind of places?
I had operations in Mexico when I was involved in ecstasy smuggling, and I met people in prison who were involved in... I met one guy who was a pilot for the Mexican cartel, and he ended up getting in trouble with the DEA, and he said that he ended up working for them, and the most dangerous stuff he ever did was working for the U.S. federal government. He'd never murdered anyone up until that point.
So he actually
he said there was no difference between either side, working for the cartel or working for the U.S. federal government. It was both like the mafia, but the federal government was more dangerous.
Well, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. But the DEA had him murdering people in Mexico?
No, they didn't have him specifically assigned to murder people. What they'd done was, I think Kiki Camarera, if I'm pronouncing it correct, he was murdered, tortured, and murdered down there. There were other people, DEA agents, that had been captured. So my friend, he was assigned to go and talk to Caro Quintero, because that had been his boss flying the loads in. He'd been flying loads in the Nogales region, cocaine and weed. He went to Caro Quintero, to try and ascertain where this guy was, and he did manage to ascertain that. And he went there himself, and then he got in a shootout with the guys who were protecting this agent, and he killed him. He got shot in the skull as well. He showed me the scar, and he went in, and this guy was chained up to some kind of torture. He was getting tortured in this like a barn, and he unchained him, and he got out of there. But during the shootout, his car had been hit, and his car wasn't working so good. So, he was absolutely crapping himself, trying to get away from the scene where he just murdered these people. And but the Americans rescued them in the end.
Fascinating stuff. You got your hands in everything over here.
That's how I learned about the framework of the Mexican cartels. Really, was through this guy, and it was this guy who got my interest really peaked about how the DEA and the CIA work with some of the Mexican organizations while fighting some of the others. And in the beginning, I thought it was all conspiracy theory stuff, but getting out and researching it myself now, I could see what everything that he was saying was the truth.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that they were selling some of this or distributing some of this coke through the Gambino family. I've seen that as well, where the FBI will come in and take these guys they pick them up at their house, they drive them around, they have a free talk with these guys, and the guys are gossiping about everybody, ratting everybody out. And I just had Frank Collada on the show the other day, and he confirmed all that too. Frank Collada is the guy from Casino, who was Joe Pesci's best friend. Hey, so what about Fast and Furious? What have you heard about that? Now, that seems like an odd. The cover story, the public story, is that they were going to trace these weapons through Mexico. What the hell? They were supplying guns to drug dealers down in Mexico.
Okay, I had a friend who worked in the kitchen in prison, who was a Mexican guy, and he would get me food and stuff out the kitchen. He would sell me food, and I'd hide it in my air conditioning vent. And he contacted me when I got out of prison. Basically, this guy was a Mexican policeman working for the cartel, and he wanted me to set up cocaine distribution in the UK, but I told him I was going to go on the straight and narrow, so I didn't want to get involved in that. But how it works is, in Mexico, a lot of these cartels are run by policemen and by the military, and what they do is they send the troops over to America to get trained.
Right.
So they get all this badass special forces training, supposedly, to go back to Mexico and bust the cartels. All these weapons and all these torture techniques. But what happens is they go back to Mexico and they get put to work by the cartels. So I don't think the US government cares as long as all the weapons are flowing and people are making money off this. And hence you get situations like Fast and Furious.
Fascinating stuff, my friend. Fascinating stuff. Okay, we're here with Shawn Attwood, and when you do this next book too about these kids on the tracks and all these bodies there in Mina, get back to it. Put you right back on the air. The book is American Made: Who Killed Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, or George H.W. Bush, and but he's written these other books too as well. You want to check them out. The English Shawn trilogy, Party Time, Hard Time, Prison Time. And Life Lessons is another one. It's a self-help book. What do you tell people in the self-help book?
Okay, I go in schools now, and I tell young people my story. I scare the living daylights out of them with the conditions in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail as part of drugs education. So my Life Lessons book is aimed at teenagers, and it's basically the 10 most important lessons I learned in my life. Stuff like just go with slow and steady progress in life, take time for introspection, help other people, value your family, and so on and so on. So these are all just tips for kids in the hope they won't do wrong.
If you had to do it over, would you return to like this kind of romantic life of the smuggler and the bon vivant, brave throw? Would you go back and do all that, or would you find something boring to do?
I think boring is the new black for me. The school kids sometimes ask, would you do it all again? And I say no, because the harm it causes society, and the drugs, and the harm I cause my family members and my loved ones. My mum had a nervous breakdown in my situation, stuff like that. But then on the other hand, I say yes, because I had to go through this to learn things and mature as a person. I was highly emotionally mature, and it's put me on this path now where I'm speaking to tens of thousands of young people a year, and I get lovely feedback from them. I get emails from parents requesting to meet me, and I do a lot of yoga and meditation, and in my heart, it's telling me I'm doing the right thing. Now, the other thing is as well, I met a mafia character in prison who was serving over 140 years. He was classified as a mass murderer. And he was at the top of the respect in the prison because he'd only murdered rival gangsters. If you've murdered a woman or a child, it's KOS, kill on sight. Prisoners try and kill those guys when they come in. So this guy's nickname was Two Tonys. And one of his favorite books was A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And he says, you've got to read this, Shawn, you've got to read this book. So I read it, and Ivan's in the Russian gulag, where, it's so cold. If you spit freezes mid-air. They're working these guys to death. If you refuse to work, you're dragged to death by horseback. You're thrown off a cliff, hung from a tree. They're losing the noses, ears, fingers to frostbite. And I read this and I'm thinking, good grief, we've got it quite good in Arizona. So whenever the prisoners complained about anything where we were at, such as the breakfast being cold in the morning, Two Tonys would say, where Ivan was at, they were fighting over a fish eyeball in the soup. How can you guys complain when there's always someone worse off? Now, in response to your question, do I miss that excitement? Two Tonys taught me that if you appreciate the small things, you don't go looking for trouble in all the wrong places. Sadly, Two Tonys died a couple of years after I was released from liver cancer from his own drug taking. But in a sense, his spirit lives on in me because I remember what he said. I wake up with a smile on my face now. There's no dead rats in my food. There's no cockroaches in my bed. I'm free. I'm in the West. All this horrible stuff's going on around the world. And it just makes me appreciate the small things and not pine to go back to that old lifestyle.
That's so true. We got to appreciate the small things. Every day above ground is a good day. Shawn, thank you so much, man. We're out of time. But American Made, Who Killed Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, or George W. Bush? Great topic. ShawnAttwood.com, and you can catch Shawn in person. You can meet him down in person May 22nd in central London, or June 13th. Coming up here this summer, you catch good old Shawn Attwood. Thank you so much, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Ed. Really appreciate it. Cheers from London.
Cheers. God bless you. Okay, there you got it. Interesting stuff. I really enjoyed that interview. And plus, I told Shawn, we were thinking about doing 2 hours, but I got to tell you, I woke up last night, in the middle of the night, I had a fever and chills and stuff like that, and I feel like crap. I got to get to bed.